I did it outside Charing Cross Hospital. It got seen by like 5 million people.
Wow.
Got messages from a nurse inside saying, "Thank you so much for coming to Charing Cross yesterday." At the time, I was in there treating a woman who would go on to lose her fight with COVID-19. When I heard this music, I was bawling, crying, but it gave me such a sense of peace.
Welcome, everybody. This is Simon Gilbert with Inspired. Inspired is all about telling, just inspiring stuff. You know, hopefully it'll do what it says on the tin. There's so much bad news. We're bombarded in day by day. And the fruitfulness of this podcast is down and reflective of how people want to hear good news stories of overcoming faith, of authentic faith and the nitty-gritty of life. And some of it is more lighthearted than others. I'm quite sure this week's going to be a lot of fun because I've got my old mate, Pat Allerton, with us. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you, Si. Great to be with you.
Yeah, it is great to be with you. I hope you can last the hour because at the time of recording, Pat's wife, Kirsty, is due to give birth tomorrow. So we're hoping that's going to last. In terms of introduction to Pat, I first met Pat at university. Well, he was at university. I'm 6 years old. I'm 49. Pat's 43. He was a student at Edinburgh, so that was 20 years ago. And mutual friends there. It was Mary Kate Lyle and Gideon Reeves and that old vintage. And
yes.
I came up preaching there, doing stuff with you guys as these on fire young students. And then you came out to Burundi, I think in about 2007. We've tracked a lot. I've come and preached at your church a few times. And for you guys that don't know about him, listen, I'm just going to have a bit of fun at his expense here. So this is from the Daily Mail, the Mail Online. I just dredged it up from the internet. The title is "God's Gift to the Women of Notting Hill, the old Etonian vicar on wheels whose mobile services and film star looks have made him a social media hit. Try to imagine," the writer says, "a typical vicar and you won't call to mind anyone like the Reverend Pat Allerton. For a start, there are the undeniable good looks and the on-trend wardrobe. Few men of the cloth team their dog collar with black jeans, a bomber jacket and Nike Air Max trainers. Throw in an old Etonian dash and a dash of schoolboy rebellion and awareness of church. I find them quite claustrophobic at times," he quotes. And it's clear 41-year-old, is 2 years out of date, 41-year-old Reverend Pat, as he likes to be known, is an unconventional clergyman. All right, one more. This is Tatler Magazine. And
2 years out of date, that is, of course.
Yeah. Tatler Magazine, the real-life hot priest, Pat Allerton, on his engagement. All right, so it says, "The vicar of Notting Hill, Pat Allerton, rose to fame at the height of lockdown as he took to the streets of London, spreading the gospel from the residential Portobello roads right through to hospitals and prisons across the capital. Allerton prayed for the nation alongside the hymn Amazing Grace, which he blasted via portable speakers. The result was victorious, and he fast became a symbol of hope and love, along with a rather long list of female admirers. Last week, he announced his engagement, so this is probably 18 months out of date, to South African girlfriend Kirsty Turnbull. As a much-loved and prominent figure of the Christian community, friends joked that there were dark glasses across the land and that Allerton was far less portable now." Now, guys, well, I don't know, Pat, whether you're rolling your eyes, whether you're going red, whether you're deeply embarrassed, or whether you're lapping it up. I suspect you're lapping it up. And my dad talks of substances. Do these people have substance? So that's all very superficial and external. Pat, show us your substance. How are you doing?
Thanks very much, Si, for that introduction. Goodness, I think the more that stuff is left online on the internet, the better. But hey, it's all, all however the Lord wants to use us, we're there to be deployed, aren't we? And I hope there's some substance there. That's why we're in this game. That's why we do what we do. And yeah, you cannot control the media. That's been a learning over the last couple of years, or indeed their headlines. So, we must just keep doing what we're doing. But thank you for reminding me of those moments.
Yeah. Well, listen, we'll come to media stuff later, but go on, give us your backstory. Family, context, coming to faith. How was that?
Yeah. Well, I didn't, grow up in a Christian home at all. There was no faith whatsoever in my family, actually. I barely even remember going to church in my early years. I think we must have gone to Sunday school because subsequently my Sunday school teacher had to phone up and track down my birth certificate, I think, at some point, or christening certificate, and she remembered me and the family. So obviously went along a bit, but I can't remember anything. There was no faith, there was no religion. It wasn't that we were antagonistic, it just didn't come up. It was irrelevant until I was sort of 17, 18, and I was just getting on with the normal things of life, messing about, being naughty here and there at school. Was at boarding school, as you've mentioned from the article, from the age of 7. So I was just trying to survive that and thrive as best I could. But religion and faith was just, I don't know, it was irrelevant. Even though I sang in choirs, I was sort of a choir boy from the age of 7 through to 14 when I gave it up, because it was definitely not cool enough to be doing that and to be seen by one's friends. So I didn't have any questions of faith or God, or I wasn't against anyone with faith, but just was like, well, it just didn't register. But then started having the big questions of life, like, what are we doing here? Where do we come from? What happens when we die? What's the point of life? Like, just working for exams and grades to get a job, to get money, to have a family and spend that money and then retire and then die? Is that it? And these questions sort of unsettled me and began my search, prompted my search towards faith and philosophy and religion. And I looked into everything, and I was reading about lots, and I'd turn things up on the radio now, whereas I used to turn it off if the topic came up. And my great friend Dave was a Christian, Dave K. Sottleworth, and he began taking me to Christian Union at school. He took me to church in London, to HTB and a couple of Onslow Square and Brompton Road. And as I went there and I heard these talks in different places, I'd be like, this is making sense. This is answering the questions I've got. It's almost like, those moments where you think the preacher is speaking just to you. Yeah. I was having a lot of those moments, and I was like, wow, I think there's something here. At the same time as still pursuing other things to satisfy and fill me up, whatever it might have been, messing about with my mates at the time. But Dave eventually asked me on a Stewards Trust camp in the Easter holidays, just before my A-levels. And it was there that I guess life changed forever, because I saw in these kids something I knew I didn't have, a joy in their face, a light in their demeanor, a radiance. And I was like, what have they got? And I sort of knew, like, they've somehow got God, but I don't know why I don't have it. But the third night there, I heard a talk on the evidence for the resurrection, the tomb being empty, where was Jesus? And as this speaker, Richard Peniston, actually, he's now a vicar, was explaining this, it was like God was opening my eyes and the veil was being lifted, and the penny was dropping that, oh my gosh, I think this is actually true. I think Jesus is alive. And if it is true, it means I can know him. And that excited me. And so I left that talk and I went back to my room that night and excitedly, I sort of read the Bible for a bit, which I'd never done before, but then I prayed a prayer seemingly to the ceiling, saying, God, I think you're there, but I don't know you yet. But I want to, come into my life. Whatever I need to turn from, I knew there were a few things, a bit of drink, a bit of drugs, a bit of this, that I was filling that hole within me with. I was like, Lord, you can have that stuff if I just get you. And I felt so vulnerable and so exposed, because I kind of knew if nothing happens now, I don't know how to offer more of myself. I don't know how to search harder than I've been searching. But in that moment, wow, the Holy Spirit filled me, the love of God and joy and peace just filled my inner being. Like I was sort of overwhelmed lying in this bed. And I was on sort of cloud 9, and I was like, wow, I'd found what I was looking for, or I'd been found by the one who was looking for me. And, that's a sort of long story short. And I went next door and woke up Dave at sort of 12:30 at night. And Dave, he's like, yeah, I think I've just become a Christian. And he's gone,
he must have loved that.
Yeah, he did love it for like about 10 seconds, and then was like, well, let's talk about it in the morning. yeah. No, he was thrilled. But it was, that's where everything changed for me. And that's the foundation really for why I do what I do today.
Yeah. So was there a dramatic change next morning? Did people notice a difference? Was it more the same?
It was a dramatic change. I think because, I don't know, when you feel that, why do people go to clubs and, take drugs and get high? And it's because they want to be in a good space. They want to be able to open up to people safely and feel secure in their inner space, in their inner world, to really connect. And when you encounter the love of God, which for me, that was better than any high, what happened, like knowing God has filled me, I feel full, I feel satisfied, I feel secure. It enabled me to just let the walls down and just be open and be kind and be gentle and loving of people and not worry what you get back or if you get rejected or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I was just beaming. I was like the next day, one of the lads who was in my we had our own rooms, but we were part of a sort of house dormitory sort of team or Bible study group that reflected each day on how things were going. And he was like, Pat, what has happened to you? It's like you're a light bulb. And that's how I felt, I mean, Jesus is the light of the world. And when he comes into our lives, he says, you are the light of the world. And I felt totally different, in that moment, a lot of fear, a lot of insecurity and angst got just driven out. Perfect love drives out fear. And I felt like a different person. I was a different person. I was just
a new creation,
version of me, a new creation at the time.
Yeah. So back to school next term and, totally stuck in, or, I mean, my story wasn't that dissimilar. It was also away on a house party and camp. And but I did come back to school and I did sort of carry on doing the booze run on Friday night Saturday night whilst help running the Christian Union on a Friday night. And then, doing a bit of drugs on the side as well. So was there a clear cut, right, this is a radically new transformed version, or was there compromise to be battled with?
I think to begin, I was pretty good, pretty on track initially. I remember, for me, my last, at school, weed was quite a big thing, smoking weed with my mates and playing a lot of sport and doing obviously work you got to do, but then doing that on the side and just having fun. And that's what me and my best friend, John, in my house used to do, regularly during the week. And so we came back to school and he came knocking and saying, oh, let's go for we used to call it a pook. Let's go for a pook.
A poop or a poke?
A pook. P-O-O-K. Yeah. Pookie. Okay. A pook. Or a reefer, let's go. And I was like, I remember the first time basically saying, no, I don't want to do that. And basically sharing my testimony in quite a clunky, wooden way. And I remember he was sitting down next to me and explaining to him, John, I don't want to do that because I've just had this experience, John. And what I've discovered, John, is everything I've ever been looking for. And John, what I've realized is God is real and he loves you, John. And he wants to and all I remember is this strange look in his eyes. And then him saying stop calling me John. Or why are you calling me John so much? And it was a bit weird. I was like, yeah, I'm sorry, John.
But you've got a bit better at showing your faith, thankfully.
Doing that, but also, there's a separation when you leave things behind. That's why it is costly. And Jesus says, look, count the costs before you come and follow me, because it's got to work out if you've got what it takes. And there is a separation from if a lot of my friendships were based around that particular activity, then it means those relationships might be strained or stretched or even lost if you stop doing that activity. So it was a short term though. So I think the Lord is merciful. It's so tough to be a Christian at school. I'm grateful in many ways the Lord only called me when I was 18, because it's tough. And so I only had sort of 7 weeks back at school before exams or something to survive. And then it was a fresh start, moving on from there to make new friends. And
And did you go on a gap year or did you go straight to Edinburgh?
So Dave was thinking gap years and talking with friends, and again, God's mercy and God's use of Dave, because my other friends are sort of going to South America, and so you can imagine the sort of gap year experience that South America brings. And I might well have gone back to my old ways, or, moved away from, or not gone deeper in the faith. But as it was, Dave gripped the situation and me and downloaded the forms and said, right, we're going to South Africa, we're going to Cape Town to do a DTS, a discipleship training school with YWAM, Youth of the Mission. Yeah. And I was like, well, that sounds okay. All right, let's do that. So he signed us up for that. So we went off and we were missionaries, for 6 months. 3 months lecture phase and learning in Cape Town on the beach, which wasn't too bad. And then 2.5 months in Madagascar for me. So steep learning curve in this new life where just so much to learn. And I'm so grateful for that foundation.
Any key
amazing
God experiences then, or lessons?
I just loved this, just learning how much truth there is in Scripture and getting to grips with this totally, it's a radical change, like a new creation, like you said, and just stepping out into it and finding community. And I'd never known community or never been part of a church and never known this depth of friendship that was possible. And so I just loved being part of this community that was of all ages and backgrounds and nations in Cape Town. And then, I'm sure there were, what were there? Lots of, doing my first preach, that came on my gap year. Preaching for far too long is just a habit I haven't quite managed to cut out, but with a translator, so twice the length even.
Oh dear, put us out of your misery. So talking about community, so you get to Edinburgh, and clearly you found, because that's where I met you, and you were in a great bunch of people. So you found community there, and got stuck in. You
had peroxide blonde hair. You remember that?
Yes, I did. I used to feel so sort of restrained culturally, submitting to the mores of Burundi, that in those early years, every summer I came back for 2 months. First day, I peroxide blonded my hair and wore the craziest.
Did you?
Yes, that was just me letting out a bit of steam. Anyway, tell us about the sort of salient moments of Edinburgh years.
Went up to Edinburgh to study theology, which I'd chosen during this searching time at school, when all I was thinking about was God and questions of God and existence. And I thought I might as well look in, make that my course up at uni. So I studied theology, made some great friends up there, just got stuck in up there. It's funny because I felt often like you see in church circles, kids who've grown up as Christians in Christian homes, often their university years are the years they go prodigal and they go sort of AWOL and walk out the door and into the world, and then, sort of cliche come back in their early 20s or mid 20s, when I was going the other way and sort of I was trying to walk in the door and into the church during my university years, and you see people going the other way. So I sort of got stuck in, church wise, and, my closest friends, I've always believed look, if you're going to live this life that is at odds with the world, that is costly, then your foundational friendships need to be those who share the same worldview, those who share our faith. Yeah. Because when the proverbial hits the fan, they're the ones we can rely on and who won't run, because at least we're facing the same direction. Yeah. So I made a whole bunch of new friends and just went about, different things. It was a great time, university years, ups and downs. It wasn't, I don't want anyone to think, I was spotless or whiter than white. I occasionally had a sort of blowout and, got stuff. There was stuff from my system. There was always stuff, I think, that will pull at each one of us. That's the enemy knows our weakness. Yeah. And there were one or two moments where I gave in to that weakness and was like, right, I've got to get this out of my system, and then needed to repent of it later. Yeah. But on the whole, it was a great experience, and learned a lot, hopefully grew a bit.
Yeah.
And 4 years up there.
I hark back to university days. I mean, other names are coming back, like Wendy Rolt and Lou Kenny. I mean, you just had a great crop of people, didn't you? And God was at work, and seeing your friends come to faith. And I loved it. I love university years for having so much concentrated time in which to see many mates come to know Jesus, be it on the course, be it in the nightclub, be it wherever. Moving on, what happened next?
I came down to London and got a job with HTB. And did some student pastoring for a year, which was great. Just to I could have got going then. Like in that moment when I came to faith at 18, and was just, I guess my heart came alive, and I was filled with God's love and light. I just wanted to share it. That's the natural overflowing desire within me. It was like, I just want to tell people about this, which is, I guess, fundamentally where I got my calling from day one. Like, I just want to tell people, AKA, I just want to be a preacher. I want to be an evangelist. I want to be Billy Graham. It's the only Christian name I knew at the time. I had that desire. So I left uni and was like, well, let's go and explore it, by working for a church. That's sort of where you do this stuff. So I worked for HTB for a year, and I could have got going, I think. But a lot of advice, certainly at that time, was, look, go and do something else first if you can. Because you'll get life experience and then it'll make you a more effective minister. And I saw the wisdom in that. Plus my mum, who was at that time sort of very anti the faith and felt I'd been sort of grabbed by a cult when I was at my weakest. And I was like, oh, well, it's not quite like that, Mum. But she was very keen for me to be a barrister. So she's like, you be a barrister. And then Nicky Gumbel and Sandy Miller had obviously both been barristers, and a lot of vicars seem to have been barristers. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I should be a barrister. So I went and did a law conversion course after that. And, Nicky was a great hero of mine. I was kind of like, I can be a barrister for a bit and then I can leave. And, when I'm preaching, I can say, like, I used to be a barrister for many years. I can be like Nicky. But at the end of my law conversion course, which I didn't do very well on, and, was like my heart really wasn't in, I felt the Lord sort of say, Pat, you don't have to be Nicky. I'm not calling you to this. So I left the law after that conversion course and actually went back and did a year at Eton doing sort of youth work, really. Yes. Wanted to come alongside teenagers and just be there, be available to them. And so I enjoyed it. It was kind of a funny year, but I enjoyed it. Like, a lot of great relationships formed and good ministry done, and friendships I've still got now. So did that year, and then still wanted to just get a job, a normal job, and do some late nights, some early mornings, pull on a suit, feel the pressures of corporate life. So I managed to get a job in financial PR, which I can confidently say I was pretty useless at.
Was that with Mark Harris at Finsbury?
With Mark, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Mark.
So he was one of the big dogs, and I did the job effectively, and I had my moments, but it doesn't stick to me, that sort of knowledge. That if you imagine we wear Velcro suits and things you're passionate about, that knowledge sticks to you like Velcro balls. Yeah, I don't seem to have the economic or financial world Velcro suit. Those balls just bounce right off me. So I was pretty rubbish. So after a year and a half, I was like, right, let's just crack on with ministry, basically.
I think we're quite similar at that level, because I likewise, I wanted to get a normal job to taste the pressures of what most people go through, but also knowing there's a call to be enacted on being an out share of the gospel. So that you felt then released to just go flat out for it, did you?
Yeah. So it's weird when you're going into something knowing you're going to give it up because you're called to something else. So I left that after a year and a half and went to Bible school, actually, where you went, I think.
Cornell training scheme.
So very similar sort of trajectory in some ways. So I did a year there before ordination training at St. Mellitus for 2 years after that. Mm-hmm. So that took us up to getting ordained, took me to 2010. And then got ordained in 2010.
and then curacy, and then unlike, I think it was tough, wasn't it? Not planting, but joining St. Peter's wasn't easy, because I know a lot of the HDB guys are sort of sent out, aren't they, with a whole load of backing, be it financial and people, and you didn't. You did what you did. Somehow you missed out on that model, and you had to put in a lot of hard yards, didn't you? With a bunch of residual good people, but lots of challenges in the mix, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I did a graft from HDB to St. Dionis in Parsons Green, so I went with 50 pals and young bucks to sort of join in there and launch an evening service and get stuck in for 3.5 years there. So I did that model there in a graft format, joining Tim and the team. But it was when I moved on from there that I just applied for this job that came up in Notting Hill. And I always thought, like, well, Notting Hill's quite a nice area, fun. And I'd had that weirdly 10 years before, I'd driven around the area, and I remember whispering a prayer. Weird that I remember it, but whispering a prayer. I mean, it was a sunny day, and the sun was on the colourful cottages on Portobello Road. And I remember just saying, Lord, do you have any ministry that needs doing around here?
Interesting.
It was sort of half serious, but... Yeah. Obviously he did, because I just applied for the job and managed somehow to get it, and then came here with, and only came with one friend. So one friend joined me, Chris, faithful Chris East, and got stuck in here. Yeah, and it's a very different experience to what a lot of my peers and friends were having, of sort of planting into an empty building, or just going with a small army and just hitting the ground running. Here it was like having to sort of try and build consensus and coalition, and I did my best at that, but I ultimately I think if people don't want the flavor of vanilla or flavor of ice cream you're selling, it's there's not much you can do, and you can only be yourself. And I think it for many, it was, I want the church to be about mission and looking out and growing and bringing people, I believe in salvation. I believe in heaven and hell and, this stuff. And it comes out in my preaching, and that's quite a strong flavor of ice cream for some who'd been here and what they'd been used to, I think. So very decent people, lovely people, but for many, I think it proved just a bit much, but they saw it. They saw the growth. They saw the growth, and new people coming, and they're like, "Look, this is great, and this needs to happen." It's just not quite to mix my metaphor, not quite my cup of tea, So some left, and some it was a bit more. There has been opposition. There has been some tricky stuff, but when you feel called to something, I always liken it to, and for lots of your listeners, so will no doubt know this, and whatever they're in, is like whatever the Lord calls us to, it doesn't mean it's going to be a bed of roses. It can often be opposition, but I always was struck by when God speaks to, I think it's to both Ezekiel and Isaiah at different points. He basically says, I'm sending you to your own people. So this isn't even opposition from outsiders, but I'm sending you to my people Israel, and they will oppose you, but I will give you a forehead of flint, and even actually of the hardest rock, and you'll be able to basically just take it. Even though you get it in the face. And it's felt a bit like that. Like there are times I'm like, gosh, this is just, why am I doing this? But God gives you what you need to stand your ground, basically.
Yeah, and you've done really well, I know, putting those hard yards. And
well, it's like you came and preached, and for instance, just let your listener be aware, like, who will be people who love you, know you, are fans of your work and know your style. We love your preaching, and it's right, and it's bang on, but it's challenging.
Yeah.
But you've preached a couple of times. The first time you preached, there were emails, there were responses, and all helping sort of people realize what sort of flavour of ice cream we're talking about.
Incidentally, you asked me to come in, didn't you, and address things quite full on. And that sermon,
don't blame me. I'm joking.
That sermon, funny enough, I think I called it the Satanic Lullaby.
Yes,
I ended up. I think that's been heard by thousands of people on YouTube or wherever, because it was an uncompromising assessment of culture and us being salt and light and what that looks like. And that is absolutely going to polarize people. And we are going to talk about culture stuff. One of the most listened to podcasts I've done is with the guy who I think we probably were at the school at the same time, Dom Muir. And the reason why
my great friend Dom.
Well, the reason why it's so listened to is that Dom is so unapologetic. I called the podcast the Modern Day Elijah, and he's so clear thinking and expressing and willing to call things out as they are, and that is very unpalatable. And it's you can't be a coward if you're going to speak the honest, undiluted truth in a culture which is so post-Christian and so fundamentally illiberal when it comes to moving away from the modern day orthodoxies. Hey, I tell you what, we're going to get to that. But I would also, I'll put that sermon link in the blurb because I think it's worth it for people to listen to. The Satanic Lullaby. It came from the story. This is an Iranian woman, a couple who got out of Iran to the Promised Land, America, and they're in America. And after a few months, the woman says to her husband, "Darling, please take me back to Iran. There's a satanic lullaby in this nation. All the Christians are asleep, and I feel myself being lulled to sleep." And that's such a powerful picture, isn't it? Because she was saying, I'd rather go back to the overt persecution, the threat of imprisonment and torture and rape in Evin prison in Iran. I'd rather go back to that than face the insidious sleepiness of that satanic lullaby in which so many people have been taken out. And she said all Christians are asleep. And that's definitely not true, but a lot have fallen asleep by the insidiousness of that satanic lullaby. And we need to live wide awake. And I love it that you're in Notting Hill, which is known for its sort of metropolitan elite and liberalism and all that. And you're just you're holding the line, and I know that's been costly to you. So I salute you for that, bro. Any comments on or lessons learned through the challenges of just holding the line?
I think one lesson is realizing if the Lord's in something, he really does. He really is Lord. As in, what I mean is he's in control. He's in charge. He's over the game. And like if you imagine a game of chess, there'd be times where I'd be like, you're looking at a very difficult move and situation, like you've got to make a difficult choice. Like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And your fingers hovering over a piece, like a pawn or a bishop, to use the right analogy, or a knight, or and like, oh, where should I go? And like, if you're feeling like I've got to do this, or this person, it's tricky, or we got to switch things up, but you don't know how to handle it. Like, Lord, please give wisdom, help. And the finger's hovering, about to move it, and then suddenly it moves by itself, or not by itself, because you're like, oh my gosh, the Lord has solved that situation, that HR issue, that person, they've changed role, or they've moved out of this position, or whatever it might be. It's seeing God is moving the chess pieces, and he's setting things up how he wants them, and as well as drawing people to you, to your cause or your mission or whatever it might be in life. He'll give you the resources you need. He'll draw the personnel, the teammates you need to come alongside. And that's where I guess the biggest learning of the last 5 years is seeing his faithfulness and provision, and just realizing, gosh, he's got access to much more resource than we do.
Yeah.
And if we do trust in him and ask him for his help, he will give us what we need. It might not be exactly what we want or what we would choose, but you realize, that actually works really well. And I hadn't thought of doing it that way. But it's exciting when you realize you're partnering with him. You're not on your own asking him if he could, occasionally help out. It's like, no, he's leading things, and you're in his sort of slipstream.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Well, long may it continue. Hey folks, I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I'm loving the response we're getting from across the world. It's just wonderful to see how encouraging and inspiring it is being and hitting the spot. Listen, if you are being blessed by it, I'd love it. Basically, this happens under the auspices of our ministry, Great Lakes Outreach, which works in the poorest and the hungriest country in the world, which is Burundi. We're having an incredible impact in the toughest of circumstances. We want to carry on supporting those local folks doing a great job. So if you wanted to, greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. You could make a donation there. I'd so appreciate it. Also, it's word of mouth, isn't it? So gossip these podcasts to other people, get them to subscribe, give us a great review. Absolutely wonderful. So grateful to you. So that's greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. If you want to do a monthly, a couple of quid a month, or a one-off donation, we'd be incredibly grateful. All right, now let's get back to the podcast. So lockdown kicks in and we're all stuck at home, and you're an extreme extrovert and you're single at that stage and you're an evangelist at heart. And so what happened?
What happened? Yeah, we had to close churches. You know, the government had said, and understandably, we couldn't gather for worship. But then even beyond that, the Church of England said, okay, vicars aren't even allowed in their buildings, you know, to even record a service, which caused a bit of a ruckus. But I just knew, like, we were locking up church, I think, for the final time, like coming out of it, coming onto the pavement and realizing we're not going to gather this week, and who knows when we'll gather again. And I just remember the thought dropping into my head, like, what if I went to the streets with a speaker and played a hymn and led a prayer, like a mini church service, just in my parish, just to say, look, guys, you're not alone. You know, God is real. He's the good shepherd. He walks with us through the valley of the shadow of death, which is what we're walking through right now. Yeah. Here's a hymn. Listen to this piece of music. It's beautiful, or sing along, or, you know, anyway, I hope it won't offend you too much, but just bring us together. Come to your windows, your doorways, you know, that sort of thing. And I'll then lead us in a prayer. You know, we can keep silence for people in the NHS and people who are grieving, people who are sick. We can pray for them in our hearts, or just, if you don't believe in God, that's fine. Just lift them up in your thoughts. Yeah. So the idea came to me to just, what if I headed to the streets and did that? And I was like, oh yeah, that could work. And I love doing things. I just think the church is called to get outside its four walls and to make a splash creatively in the arts, in the media, whatever we can do, just to show the world that the church is alive and carry the message that Jesus is alive. So this was like in line with, I mean, I've done other things on Parliament Square, like big prayer gatherings and worship times, and got the Bible read over a whole year, daily readings done each day, and the whole Bible read over Parliament, from Parliament, you know. So I love doing things outside anyway. So it was right in line with sort of, I think, things God's called me to in the past. I was like, yeah, that could work. So about sort of planning it, and my housemate Chris at the time, you know, we came, and one day when lockdown properly kicked in, you know, pretty much the next day we came and raided the church for some speakers for the kit and headed off to the Portobello Road. And then it's like, gosh, we need a hymn. Hang on, which one? And I sort of knew immediately, like, it needs to be Amazing Grace, because, you know, we couldn't just do, you know, The Lion and the Lamb or something, a modern song that no one would know. You need to do something that Christians and non-Christians like and feel like, yeah, that's at the very least a beautiful piece of music. And stumbled on this amazing recording by Judy Collins. And long story short, you know, did it the first time, sort of said, you know, afternoon, people at Portobello Road, you know, my name's Pat, I'm a vicar in the Church of England, I'm your local vicar, in fact. And saw faces appearing at windows, doorways, and said, look, this is what we're going to do. I hope that's okay. It will be over, you know, the pain will be over in 5 minutes, so don't worry. But if you want to join in, you can. And just gave a little message of hope, like, look, we're not alone. You know, God loves you. Jesus is alive, and he's the good shepherd. So then led us in this mini service, and didn't quite know how people would respond, but was very encouraged by the response. You know, people did seem to embrace it and get something from it. And they said, please come back. So I did. But then I just set about like going from street to street, just saying, okay, we can do this more. This seems to be more than that. It was just like God's presence was there. It just felt like his hand was on it.
Yeah.
And just went on to do it, 64 times in all, in different places around London and on a bike. So it was my daily form of exercise because, complaints did come in, like mainly from clergy, other vicars, saying, why is he doing this? Why are you writing to poor Bishop Graham? Like, why are you allowing him to do this? And him being like, well, I think it's quite a good witness. I think he should be able to do it, but having to play within the rules. So, hey, let's get a bike and do it as your daily exercise and that. So, yeah, this sort of thing happened, and I just went and did it. And yeah, weirdly, sort of, I guess the media didn't have much else to write about at the time. And so they noticed this and they're like, oh, what's that weird priest doing? Let's go and speak to him. So it got a bit of media attention, which is interesting.
I mean, quite a lot of media attention, didn't it? And was that when you were who labelled you the portable priest?
Well, I'd already set up the Portobello priest
Okay.
A year or so before, because the Portobello Road, I'm in my office having this chat with you, and the hall is on the Portobello Road. So I was like, oh, well, I'll be the Portobello priest, and communicate with the parish through that account and say what we're up to and blah, blah, blah. But actually it was I think it was a sovereign God moving the chess pieces moment to go back to that this journalist from the Associated Press did an interview with me and found out the story and wrote up the article and quite without my permission renamed me the portable priest. And when I saw it, I was like, no, I'm the Portobello priest. And I got in touch and said, look, I'm the Portobello. You've got this wrong. And she's like, oh, I thought it was a good name. So I've gone with that. And it's a bit late now. It's gone out to sort of 15,000 media outlets. So I was like, oh. So I think it was God's hand was in it, because it was like, well, that was what I was suddenly portable. And it was like, oh, that works much better. And it had gone beyond the parish at that point, and so it's just a funny old time.
Any great stories out of that particularly?
I mean, I think the messages I received from a lot of people and probably got hundreds, through those 10 weeks, particularly when I was going out. But people who I love messages that would come in that would say things like, I'm not religious, but, and then go on to say, this has really warmed me. I'm here with tears in my eyes. I mean, there was one recording, I did it outside Charing Cross Hospital because a friend said, you need to go to the hospitals. And I was like, yes. So I went and did it outside Charing Cross. And these buildings are so big and impregnable, you think, can anyone hear anything? But got messages from a nurse inside saying, thank you so much for coming to Charing Cross yesterday. At the time I was in there treating a woman, an elderly lady who would go on to lose her fight with COVID-19. When I heard this music, I was bawling, crying. But it gave me such a sense of peace. So thank you, something like that. But this other person filmed it from her house. All they could see was the hospital. They couldn't see me or where it was coming from. And they just put on Facebook like heavenly music over Charing Cross Hospital.
Yeah.
And to her 180 friends. But that video went sort of viral. And I don't just mean, I think there's Christian viral and then there's viral. I mean, there's stuff that goes around in our Christian bubble that we get excited about, but doesn't get out beyond the echo chamber of the church. But then there's stuff that does sometimes go a bit more viral. And this thing went sort of more viral and it got seen by like 5 million people.
Wow.
But reading the comments there of people like, what is this? This is so moving. Like, I'm in tears here. Like, no, I'm not crying. You're crying. And just throughout doing it, my point being, I just think God met people where they were at. Like, we might not be seeing, and we're not seeing vast amounts at this stage, crossing the thresholds, coming to church, necessarily doing Alpha or whatever it might be. But I think there are thousands, millions of hungry people out there who will consume stuff privately on their phones in the safety of their own sitting room, or where we go to them. And it was evidenced by people saying, look, I'm not a Christian, but I heard you do this and it really moved me.
Yeah.
And I felt this strange, a woman got sent down to basically shut me up by her husband, who was on a conference call at the time. She said, I came down to find you, to ask you to be quiet or turn it down a bit. But in the end, I just found myself on the doorstep with tears in my eyes and warmth in my heart, and just, I don't know what seeds were sown. And we'll never fully know anything that we give ourselves to for the Lord until heaven. But I think God was touching people, or his presence was definitely at work.
Yeah. Oh, mate, so well done. And you know what? I'm just kicking myself that, I have one of those woofers, and I've gone out and done street stuff, but I didn't during lockdown. I should have just copied you, and they should have been on every town in the country. We should have been out there doing it, because the church, I don't know, some did well, but the church in general, capital C, didn't do so well during lockdown in terms of reaching out in the communities, I feel. Listen, we're running out of time, but what I love that came out of that was obviously you got on the media's radar, and I've seen you a number of times on Sunday morning TV being the Christian that's wheeled on to give commentary. And what I love is that I'm not going to blow smoke out your backside, but you do it so well in terms of the sometimes quite normal questions that you always manage to slip in a serious gospel answer. So I'm even quoting that Tatler magazine, where you ask, a question that you managed to bring in the gospel. It's like, asked how it feels being engaged as a vicar, Allerton says, it's incredible to think that our love for one another and our marriage is just a picture of how much Jesus loves his bride, the church. And, great answer. And, always, you post those clips on Facebook, don't you, of your slots, and you seize those opportunities, and you're very good at it. And we need followers of Jesus in the media, don't we?
Yeah. Well, that's my view, is like, we don't need we don't need celebrities. And it's surreal to me to get these opportunities. I've always grieved that there's not more of a Christian voice in the world, in the media, that we're so sidelined. And so I think the Lord's obviously over the years has seen that heart, and my longing I'll speak to a room with 10 people in it, or happily about the gospel and about Jesus, or I'll speak on a platform with 10 million people on it. In a sense, it shouldn't matter to us. And that, I hope the Lord's always seen my heart, which is why these strange doors are opening. But I don't see it as like it's not opening. I don't want to use it for me or for my platform. I just want to use it to say something of eternal value and worth. Yeah. Because I don't know if the opportunity will come again. I'm not trying to build a brand here. I'm just going to say yes to any opportunity, because there's always ways to get the gospel in. Everything is about God and about Jesus. So, every stream leads to the great river of Christ. And so they give you the stories beforehand, the newspaper items they want you to look at. And with a bit of thought, there's always a way to smuggle, I call it smuggling in the gospel, and say something that might touch someone who's never heard it. Because all I know is at the moment, the media's friendly, and, there seems to be a bit of favor on it. But I'm well aware tomorrow, it feels like Daniel in the lion's den. Tomorrow, the lions might actually open their mouths and tear me to pieces. And we've got to be ready for that as Christians. So it's just take every opportunity, the gospel, New Testament calls us to it, doesn't it? It says, be wise, for the days are evil. Just take every opportunity. And so that's what I seek to do until they work me out and realize that this guy's just using us to preach the gospel. But nobody tell them. And hopefully it might continue.
Well, if this goes viral, your secret will be out. So we'll try to keep it under wraps. Mate, time has come to an end. Anything we've missed? And under that question, it would be, you just come out with a book. Tell us about that. The back of this and through this, some publishers got in touch, and thankfully, they all wanted a book on hope. But as I explained, I can talk about hope. I'll talk about God and Jesus, and sort of that saw off Penguin and a couple of others. You're not interested in that.
but one stayed true, which I'm so grateful for. And so I've managed to bring out a book. It's called A Pocket Full of Hope. And it's really written for I guess, lots of my friends and my family who don't know Jesus. It's written for people who, it's a very gentle introduction to the concepts of faith, looking at 50 issues of human life we all face, like anxiety, grief, forgiveness, success, vulnerability, authenticity, whatever it might be, reflections, meditations, a bit of scripture in there, but it talks about the common ground we all have, but then it just shares, look, this is the difference faith and knowing God, knowing Jesus can make to how you view those issues and how you live out life facing those issues. So I really hope that it will get into hands. I really hope that it will become one of the go-to books that Christians give to their non-Christian friends.
Yes, we need those.
That's my heart with it, because I don't think there are many out there that have the right voice and the right tone and are gentle enough. I think we can produce things that stay within the Christian bubble, but this is going to be sold in Waterstones. This is, I hope, just going to be, Lord bless it, hopefully a blessing to draw many people, to help them realize, I'd never thought of it like that. So hopefully it can be a blessing, a sort of pre-alpha book to give to your friends who may be nowhere spiritually, or might be somewhere, but they don't yet understand Christ.
Yeah, well, that is, I think, a very needed book. I'm thinking, what shall I give to someone? That is brilliant. So it's A Pocket Full of Hope. It's a seismic week or month in the life of Patrick Allerton, because at the time of recording, as we said at the start, he is due to become a dad tomorrow. So by the time we listen to this, he will be a dad. And this book is coming out, is it next week? So we wish Kirsty and Baba all the best in the coming chapter. And it's funny, you said before we pressed the button to go live, you said you're tired now. Well, I guess you'll be a bit more tired when you listen to this live. But dude, cheering you on, cheering the folk of St. Peter's Notting Hill, cheering the gospel work going on there, cheering all your stuff in the media, and made this book, for God's glory, have a massive impact. And Pat, thanks so much for being on Inspired.
Thanks so much, Si. God bless you, bro.
Brilliant, mate. Well, listen, folks, I hope you've enjoyed it. Love it how week by week we get people from such different sort of journeys and vantage points, and the commonality of, it's not always easy, but Jesus is worth everything, and being creative in what that looks like. So if you've enjoyed it, which I presume you have, if you've been inspired, please help us out by giving us a great review on Spotify or iTunes. We'll put Pat's details in the blurb. And if you want in touch with me, it's simongilbo.com or any of the social media platforms. And I want to thank Adam Thomas Steer for the editing and Mike Sandyman for the mixing. We've got another fantastic guest next week. So gossip these podcasts, and I'll see you again. Looking forward to that. In the meantime, take care and toodaloo.